Welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. This is episode 58. Concussion Talk Podcast is presented by HeadCheck Health. HeadCheck Health bridges the gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Track Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck Health to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. For episode 58, I'm on with Emily Gittings of Concussion Montreal, McGill University's concussion group. And so Emily, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And you introduce yourself and what could you involved in concussion, and also what your group does and who you serve in McGill.
Yeah, so as you just said, my name's Emily Gittings. So I'm the director of the McGill Students for Concussion Legacy Foundation. So we are a branch of the Concussion Legacy Foundation that's based at McGill. We basically have two teams. We have an education team and a support team. So our education team goes into schools around McGill, elementary, CEGEPs, secondary schools, and we talk about what a concussion is, why it's important, what you should do if you think you have one or you think one of your friends has one. And we've also spoken at like a mental health symposium and spoken to a bunch of the medical response teams from different universities. So we do different workshops. And then we have our support group that basically meets once a week. And then they also have one more fun concussion-friendly event a month, like a painting event or something to that extent. So yeah, that's kind of what we do. And then we also, we were supposed to have a symposium this month with some researchers, and then some.
The hope was to put this out before the symposium, but I guess it's March 13th, Friday, March 13th when we're recording this. So and McGill is closed today.
Yeah, McGill is closed today. And the event was supposed to be at the Montreal Neurological Institute, which is now not hosting events until the end of June.
Yeah.
Tentatively. So we'll hopefully be having the symposium sometime in the fall.
Okay. And do you have any guests lined up? Who was going to be at your symposium that you were looking forward to seeing or hearing?
Yeah, so we had a researcher from McGill, so we were going to have 3 speakers and then a panelist. We had a researcher from McGill named Alan Petito, who's very good. He was going to talk about some of the new imaging and new treatment as far as concussions, which I'm interested to know what that is, because I had no idea that was even a thing. So I'll be really excited to hear about that. And then we had a former hockey player named Alan Glabinski who was going to come speak.
Okay.
And he was going to just talk about why it's important to, decrease the amount of contact sports at a younger age.
Right.
Because of what he's dealing with now in his older years. And then we were going to have a panelist with a neuropsychologist who was also probably going to be one of the speakers. As well as a physio, a researcher, and a medical doctor. And the panel would have been moderated by somebody who dealt with a concussion. And I think the panel is really neat because it kind of exposes the disconnect between these different specialized fields in concussion recovery. Yeah, and then the floor would have been opened up for the audience to ask questions.
Were you expecting a lot of people at this?
This is our first year doing the actual symposium. Last year we did a panel, and I think we had around 30 people. We were expecting more for this one. just based on the fact that we got the support group up and running a lot better this year. So we have more involvement with that, and our name is expanding. So.
Yeah. So before I asked you about yourself and how you got involved, where like, do you serve? Do you serve just McGill University, or do you serve like all of Montreal or whoever wants to ask questions?
Um, we serve whoever wants to ask questions. So actually, a lot of the people that come into the support group are not McGill students. Um,
Okay, that's
they're
good
just
now.
from the community. Yeah, we didn't feel like
You want
it's
to limit it?
yeah fair to limit it, especially when we're the only group here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just doesn't sit well with me.
No. Yeah, you were saying before this that you're the only concussion support group in Montreal, and then in Quebec, as far as you know.
Yeah, in Quebec, as far as I know, if there are others, I would love to know about them. But yeah, we've gotten messages from people from Quebec City and these other areas around Quebec. And so we also, like, our resource list has expanded to not just the Montreal area, but
Yeah.
Quebec. That way we can get information to them as well. So it is really kind of whoever needs help. Um,
Right.
as long as we're in a spot to help them, then we're willing to do it.
Well, that's a good segue to find out exactly what is Emily's story. Why and how did you get involved in concussion and this concussion group in McGill?
Yeah, so it is a bit of a long story.
We got time.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think the thing about my story is that it really exposes this complexity between concussion recovery regarding the direct impacts of the injury, but in combination with the fact that life doesn't really stop when you're injured, and external events may have a large impact on the recovery. So I think like while each of our stories are kind of unique, the feelings that I experienced and the roots of my behaviors following my concussion are the same as the majority of the people that I've talked to that have dealt with and are aware that they're dealing with the long-term effects of concussions.
Yeah.
So it kind of all started when I was 14 years old.
Okay.
I'm 22 now. So I suffered a concussion in a haunted house, actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, I can laugh at it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's why.
I, yeah. So I heard a chainsaw and I took off running. Um, and all I remember is getting off the ground. And the next
Yeah.
day I was playing a soccer game. So I used to be a goalie.
So
And
do you know what? Sorry, do you know what happened? Like, what'd you hit? Like,
well,
you.
I'm
Oh,
gonna
you'll
tell
get
you.
that? Okay. Oh, sorry.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, no worries. So the next day I'm playing this soccer game and I dive for a ball and I start seeing stars. And I don't really know what a concussion is,
Yeah.
but I think a girl on my team had gotten one the week before, and so I knew it had to do with the head. So
Yeah.
And then that week at school, I was reading, and I was like, I went home and I was like, Dad, I think I'm allergic to reading because it was making me sick. I had no
Yeah.
idea what a concussion was, and
Yeah.
finally, I asked one of my friends that had been in the haunted house. I was like, Hey, did I hit my head when I fell at the haunted house? And they said, No, you sprinted into a concrete wall.
Oops.
Knocked myself out. um, which is crazy. And so that one was like a 2 week recovery, which I think
Oh.
is a bit long for a first concussion.
Yeah.
Looking back on it now, I have these vivid memories of like,
Well, you're obviously going quick. You're a good sprinter, I guess, or soccer.
yeah,
You're going
something.
pretty fast. That
um,
wall.
yeah, but I have these memories of like the world just kind of flipping sideways while I was running at practice and me
Oh
falling
yeah.
over and getting
Oh yeah.
back up and being like, oh, maybe it's my allergies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so looking back, I probably had quite a few concussions. But yeah, after 2 weeks, I was back on the field. But then 6 months later, um, I was playing a soccer game. I bent down to pick up a soccer ball, and this girl ran into me.
Mm.
It was just kind of a freak accident. So I remember waking up on the ground jumping up and being like, "Where's the soccer ball?" And this girl had broken her ankle and was super distressed. So I don't think anyone really realized that I had gotten knocked out.
Yeah.
Uh, and I didn't. Being knocked out's really weird because you don't really remember it.
Yeah, and then you see someone with a broken ankle, you're like, oh god, they're worse off than I am.
Yeah, and especially if you're just out for a split second, you
Yeah.
just get up and keep going. So that was on a Thursday, and I was just in total denial about potentially having had a concussion. And I also really had no education or understanding about these long-term effects and how common they are. So, which is what I really like about the education side of our group. I think
Yeah.
it's really important to talk about that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't remember the next day very well, that Friday. I do remember going and playing a soccer game Saturday. And not much happened, but I was really car sick on the way to it, which was a bit of a red flag. But again, you don't, as an athlete, you don't want anything to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I was also just really out of it, and unable to really think properly. And then that Sunday, the next day, I was playing a game, and at the time, I was regarded as a very good goalie. Like,
Okay.
I was very good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
more or less what happened is somebody shot the ball and it hit the back of the net, and then I dove for it.
Ah.
And
Oops.
I was like, whoa, that's weird.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing stars and TV static. And that's called visual snow, which is
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, and to this day, I still see stars and static.
Really? Really? Like when you're awake or when you're lying
Um,
down or
it's 24/7, eyes
really?
open, eyes closed, in the dark, in the light. I always see it. And
Do you
it,
see it now?
yeah,
Well,
24/7. And
yeah.
yeah, and that's the other thing about going in and talking to these kids is I can be like, look, I got this concussion on a Thursday and I continued to play. And now I
Yeah.
see TV static 24/7 and it's a pain. Like,
You didn't see that until Sunday?
yeah,
You didn't see the snow until after the end of Sunday?
right.
Okay,
Yeah,
well.
at least to my recollection. It took
Yeah.
me a while to realize that there was something wrong with my vision. I knew I was
Yeah.
seeing stars starting that day a
Yeah.
lot. Um, the stars I don't see all the time. It's only bright surfaces. Um, so at that point, I told my parents that I thought I was concussed. And they were like, all right, like rest like you did for the other one. We're thinking we're concussion pros. We just
Yeah.
went through this.
Yeah.
And after 2 weeks, I wasn't better. So we ended up going to 7 different doctors in my hometown.
Jeez.
Yeah, we saw 2 neurologists, and they told me I had developed migraines, um, which I didn't know much about concussions. I was 15 at this point,
Yeah.
but that didn't really sit well with me. I wanted to be able to do something to get better. Um, and I don't remember a ton about this year after my concussion. I don't have a lot of personal memories. It's more
Yeah.
like a list of Wikipedia facts in my
Yeah,
brain.
like what happened, yeah.
Yeah, like I know what happened, but I don't really remember.
Yeah, vividly, yeah. I
Yeah,
gotcha.
and so yeah, after 6 weeks, so well, important to say is that all these doctors were like, "Oh, it's in your head. Like
Yeah.
you just don't want to go to school or go do these life things. Like you're kind of being over dramatic about it, more or less,
Yeah.
is how I was perceiving it." And I was like, all right. So I did my best to act normal, but my parents did get me in to see a concussion specialist in at Duke University, which is about 2 hours from where I grew up in North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we saw a concussion specialist, and this was again 6 weeks after, and my reaction time was in the sixth percentile, like
Mm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we did this test with this flashlight where I saw 4 dots on the walls.
Yeah.
Um, and he said to focus on the top one, and 2 of the dots moved to the right, and 2 of the dots moved to the left. And at this point, he turned the light on, and my mom was shocked.
Oh, yeah.
Because up until this point, she's kind of just trying to trust these other doctors that it's all
Yeah.
in my head. And I had a really bad nystagmus, which is
Yeah.
just like a hangover
I
without
actually,
the party. Yeah.
I do know that because I do a standardized patient thing for with the med school here, and I always told if I follow the finger when I follow it left, I see like it kind of jumps was like 2 inches. So I had double vision. So
Yeah,
when I follow that way, then I can see my eye wobbles or jumps whatever it does, and
right.
just I can see.
Yeah. Yeah, no, my mom said it was really scary when they were doing the test. They put like a camera over your eye and move your head backwards, and she was like, "Your pupils got so big, it looked like something out of like the Blair Witch
Oh,
Project." And I was like, "Whoa." Um, so, well, but at that point, what was cool is that I did find out that there is a lot you can do for concussions. So I did
yeah,
start in visual rehab and I started in physical therapy. Um, but the big thing that kind of got overlooked at this point is that I did lose my identity in that time. So I had been a
right.
trumpet, yeah, I'd been a trumpet player and a soccer player.
Did you have
I,
one that was more you? Were you more? Do you associate yourself more with music or more with sports, or is it
it was
just kind of both?
it was a pretty even mix.
Yeah,
After school, I would go from either marching band or jazz band practice,
yeah.
then to soccer practice.
Oh, okay.
So it was both pretty even.
And you like them both the same, more or
Yeah,
less.
I
Yeah,
loved them both. I kind of lost that, and I lost the groups that came with that, and I couldn't even run anymore. And I remember my ADHD got a lot worse. I stopped reading for fun. Um, and I don't remember. I don't have great vivid memories of this time period, but I remember a lot of the feelings.
yeah,
And a lot of what I remember is like, while I would make progress sometimes, at other times my recovery is at a standstill, which I
yeah,
think is important in concussion recovery. Is it's not just like a linear line.
yeah.
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, yes, it is.
It's up and down. During those times where you're kind of at a standstill, I remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, like I'll never be able to function again. Like I'm never gonna be okay, which is
Yeah,
terrifying.
especially when
And
you're 15. Yeah,
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 and I'm supposed to be in high school doing all these high
yeah,
school things, and here I am, like, what is happening?
yeah,
um, at 15, I've been given this task to rebuild my life, and
yeah.
it's really scary. And I believe until I just kind of like floated through my life, like I'm pretty sure I would just wander the hallways of the school, and they would just kind of let me do whatever I wanted. And my goal had been to be able to run cross country 6 months later, which didn't happen because I was still symptomatic. And so we got to like,
Did you have balance issues or did you just fatigue and
yeah,
or,
I had pretty bad balance issues. So I was in vestibular therapy, and they were kind
okay?
of strapping me into this machine, and the floor would drop.
Oh yeah,
Of course, then I got really good at counting how many seconds
yeah,
before the floor would move because I did it so many times.
yeah.
Um, yeah, not the best.
No,
Um,
not very reliable.
yeah. So after like 9 months of that, they ended up physically, clearing me.
Yeah,
Uh, you're good to go. You're not having headaches as much. You can read. I'm in physical therapy, and I have
yeah,
one foot on a balance board and one foot
yeah.
on like one of those like yoga balls, but
Bosu's,
just half.
Bosu's. Yeah, like half a ball. Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah,
yeah.
and they're
Bosu. Yeah,
like throwing stuff at me, and I'm
yeah,
catching it. So physically, I'm doing great. Um, but the issue came into play at this point is that while I was physically cleared, psychologically, I wasn't okay.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and at some level, I knew that I didn't really feel like a part of the world and that I was pretty out of it. It was more like I was just watching a movie.
Gotcha.
Um, and I knew I didn't feel like as smart as I used to be. But I also couldn't remember what I felt like before my concussion.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Is one of the biggest issues is you can't verbalize what's wrong when you don't
Yeah.
have
Know your old
like what
self.
normal is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just because I couldn't identify what something was wrong, I just kept saying something seemed off. But nonetheless, like the doctors are saying I'm okay. I want to be okay. Everyone around me wants me to be okay. So I just kind of adapted this mindset that I was okay.
Yeah.
Um, and then this, and I don't know if you've dealt with this. I know we see a lot of people in the concussion support group dealing with
Yeah.
this. Is this fear kind of set in, and I was
Uh,
so
yeah.
terrified of getting another concussion. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
just so hyper vigilant.
Well, the
Um,
thing is, yeah, me, I didn't have a concussion. I had a, severe brain injury, and
okay,
so my injury was bad enough that I don't know, I kind of, I don't know, maybe jumped over all that. Just, I have no fear in that. Maybe it's just as bad, but I'm not like running my head in the walls or any of that. Like, not the. But I mean, I'm not like going around looking for, reasons to hit my head. But I'm not scared about anything. Just
okay.
my legs and stuff. But that's also now I've been away from my brain injury for 17 years. So you know, maybe that just comes with time. I know
Yeah,
my reflexes are faster than I had. When they opened the cupboard, like if I close my head, I whip my head back quickly. Like it was definitely a natural like motion to get my head out of the way of anything.
right. No, I remember like, and it was to the point to where like I could convince myself that like a tissue sitting on the table was somehow going to concuss me.
Yeah,
Like just it constantly in this state of worrying about the next concussion, which is really crippling
yeah,
because I
yeah.
couldn't really be part of the world or present with the world when I was constantly
Of course
focused
not.
on,
Yeah,
what if this happens?
yeah.
And any time I stepped foot on a soccer field, I would immediately get symptoms. So it's
Like
kind of
you
like
love anxiety.
yeah, my body was just hitting this panic button.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and I've met people in the support group who like can't even like won't even accept a hug because they're so terrified. And you have
yeah,
people who are pretty short ducking under doorways.
yeah. I've
They're
seen that
getting,
too.
yeah. And this is one of these other things that's a bit overlooked is like this it's almost like a post traumatic
Yeah, definitely
stress
is. It is. It's traumatic injury.
yeah,
It's
I mean and it
so,
makes sense like while you're not like nobody was holding a gun to my head. Like I
yeah,
did lose my entire life and identity. Not
exactly.
entire, but a good chunk of it.
Yeah,
Um, and so yeah, eventually I was assessed by a psychologist and told that I shouldn't play contact sports or soccer anymore. Um, which like in my state of I'm okay, I just kind of accepted, didn't really think about it, and I moved on towards coaching soccer and reading about the brain, and I picked up bass guitar, which ended up being
yeah.
awesome. That
You're
kind of
you're a
became an
good
instrument.
guitarist now.
Yeah, I play bass guitar and
Who's
drum.
your Who's your idol? Think your icon?
For bass?
Emily? Is Emily getting your icon now?
No,
I
I think
don't put you on the spot. I don't mean that. It's not about the guitar now. So you can, if you can't think
I,
of a good one, you can, or you can
well,
just skip.
I have to say, as a bass player, I am a big fan of John Paul Jones.
Oh yeah,
Of course, yes, and
yeah.
I love Flea, and there's a couple others.
Is your a big guitar? Is your guitar like way too big for you? Like
My bass
fleas?
guitar, yeah,
Yeah,
it
like
looks a little big on me.
yeah.
I'm about 5'2".
Oh yeah, your mom's height. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a bit big, but it's fun.
yeah,
Um, so I did end up like getting to pick up that, and coaching soccer became really fun, and I really just had this goal of helping others with concussions. Like I promised myself that when I was
yeah,
15, because if these other people can't verbalize it and they're trying to tell me they're off it, at least like I at that point will hopefully have some way to verbalize some of what happened. Um, which I'm getting more and more ways to verbalize as we go on. Um, and at this point, so I'm like, um, I guess I'm just about a year out of my concussion, and then my story gets really complex
yeah.
because, I still don't feel like myself again. Myself, like whatever
Yeah,
that
but yeah,
is,
what that was, yeah,
I don't know, I can't remember.
yeah.
Um, and my uncle ended up dying by suicide.
Oh,
And then, so then I'm dealing with this grief and all these family dynamics that are changing. Um, and it's kind of totally at this point, like the concussion has completely been forgotten about.
Yeah.
And then 13 months later, I had an uncle die of an overdose.
Jeez.
And then in the middle of this, I started developing narcolepsy,
Oh.
which is a sleep disorder.
Yeah.
We have sleep attacks, which the narcolepsy may or may not be related to the concussion.
I was gonna ask that. Yeah.
Yeah, so new research is showing that they're looking at brains of people that have dealt with traumatic brain injury post-mortem, and they're missing orexin, which is the neurotransmitter that's lost in concussion, or that's lost in narcolepsy. Um,
Okay.
so there's a chance that it is related to the concussion, especially as we're finding out more about neuroinflammation processes and stuff that kind of happens down the road that has negative
Right.
impacts. I will probably never fully know the answer as to whether it was a concussion or an autoimmune process. But as of now, nobody else is diagnosed in my family, and it does tend to be somewhat genetic. Um, so I think the thing at this point is like, I was still feeling really dissociated from the world, and I was struggling with like adapting to this new life, and I
Yeah.
was kind of unknowingly ignoring this grief I was feeling about my own former life.
Yeah.
Uh, so I didn't really speak up about it because I
So
kind of just,
you were like grieving for this life that you didn't really remember or
right,
recognize. Yeah.
right.
Okay.
And I just assumed that what I was feeling at this point was what everyone around me was feeling, which was the grief of losing two loved ones.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was also dealing with my own grief coming back from a concussion
Yeah.
still was never fully better from, and then also developing a sleep disorder.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's kind of like, regardless of whether one wants to believe it's, all of this, like what happened with me and these events that I'm going to continue to talk about, is because of a direct biological injury, or if it's simply an add up of stresses and traumas or a combination of these things. Like, I really do believe that the concussion impacted my mental health in a big way, and that
Yeah.
it really impacted my ability to be able to handle those situations. Because
Right.
now I am 16, 17 years old, dealing with the loss of two uncles.
Yeah.
It's completely changed my family dynamic. My parents are both crushed, and they're
Yeah.
kind of absent, which makes sense. And then was falling asleep all the time for unknown reasons,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to rebuild this life that I used to have.
Yeah.
Uh, so it gets like, it's very, very complex because anybody would struggle in that situation without the concussion.
Yeah.
But I think it really did lower my capabilities of handling it. So that's kind of like when my story just kind of becomes like this classic struggle with mental health, is like, by the time I graduated high school, and so I got my concussion in my first year, I
Yeah.
had just like full blown undiagnosed narcolepsy. I had come close to committing suicide.
Wow.
I was really depressed. Yeah, and
Yeah.
like the suicide rates after traumatic
Yeah.
brain injury are
Yeah.
quite.
Wow.
Yeah, I was reading this study done on like 200,000 Canadians, and they're saying that it, after a single mild traumatic brain injury, one is 3 times more likely to commit suicide.
Yeah. I've seen
And,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and the peak time being 5 to 6 years after the concussion.
Right.
Which, one mild traumatic brain injury that, physically symptoms last, or
Yeah.
physiologically last 3 days,
Yeah.
we're not thinking about that 3 times or 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
But there is, like, the correlations are quite strong.
Yeah.
Um, so, like at this point, I also just had a really hard time admitting something was wrong because, all these doctors were like, "You're okay, you're okay, you're okay."
Yeah.
And I saw a therapist a few times after, experiencing the intense suicidal ideation. But I think I just kind of said it was because my uncles, and I was under the impression that, what I was dealing with, um,
It's grief.
yeah, it was grief was what
Yeah.
everyone else was dealing with, but I was only
Yeah.
identifying a small part of what I was going through.
Right.
Um, and so after graduating high school, which is now around 3 years after the concussion, I knew I wasn't ready for university.
Yeah.
So yeah, I couldn't seem to stay awake. Like I wasn't focused. I was pretty apathetic at this point, which is something we talk a lot about in the
Yeah.
support the app. You just have a hard time being empathetic. You don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you feel like you're watching a movie, like how are you supposed to, be part of it?
Yeah.
So this one I just decided to defer university and move to Nashville,
Mm.
Tennessee. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I was moving out there to play bass and work on my mental health. So I was going to be a rock star.
Yeah.
Um, this whole time though, I knew I wanted to help people dealing with concussions. Um, but I knew I needed to figure out how to be okay. So I started really working on my perception of loss, because up to this point, everything was about loss. So I started really focusing on what I gained, and like I'd become a bass player, I'd become a soccer coach, and
Yeah.
I had a direction in my life. I really fell in love with neuroscience and the brain, and psychology, and I ended up landing a job as a research assistant at Vanderbilt University.
Nice.
Uh, yeah, and
That's in Nashville.
yeah, it
Okay.
is. In
Yeah.
my days, like it became less about being a rock star, more about being in the office, learning about the brain.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
so yeah, with that, and I did biofeedback, which I don't know how big that is here in Canada. I hear some
I
mixed.
know. I know what it is, but I don't.
Yeah, I ended up doing that, and it did seem to help with the derealization, which is what I'm referring to when I'm talking about feeling like I'm watching a movie. It's this kind of dissociated feeling
Okay.
from reality.
Yeah.
Um, and so with that and really becoming self-aware about how I was thinking about the world, I like pulled myself out of this depression that I'd been dealing with since the concussion. Um, but in that, I didn't know that I was going to open this door to all these feelings of grief that I'd been ignoring for a really long time. And so at this point, we're like 4 years from my concussion, and I like vividly remember the day that the derealization went away, that I'd
Oh,
been
yeah.
dealing with since, I don't know if the derealization set in that Thursday when I got the concussion or that Sunday when maybe I injured it a little bit more. Uh,
You cried or ever? Does that happen, or
Sorry.
did you like cry or scream or something? Did that made you realize that it's gone? The
Well,
realization's gone.
I was in a grocery store, in a Kroger grocery store, which is
Okay.
an awesome store in
Yeah.
Nashville. I think this is why I think it's awesome.
Okay. Okay.
And I think I was in the cereal box aisle, and I
Yeah.
remember it really vividly. And I wanted to cry because the cereal boxes were real. And I remember walking around that store just looking at people and being
Yeah.
like, wow, like these
Yeah.
are people, I'm a part of this world. And like I wasn't watching this
That's good.
movie anymore. And it was really, really exciting for a few days until like all of these feelings came back of
Ah,
grief and isolation, and it was so, so much more intense
yeah.
because I didn't have
Cause
the derealization.
yeah. Gotcha.
It was
That makes sense.
so intense. So my depression got a lot worse. Um, and meanwhile, I still don't know why I'm falling asleep all the time,
Yeah.
except my doctors have told me it's depression. But I was tired all the time.
Yeah.
Um, well, without really like fully realizing it, I really started to self-medicate at this point. Um, because I wanted to escape the feelings of what I was feeling, and being drunk or high made me feel a lot like how I had felt
Right.
for 4 years.
Right.
So it was kind of like this recreation of all that I knew from 14, 15 years old to 18, 19 years
Yeah.
old. Like I was recreating it because what else did I know? Like I'm not, I don't have any support for this. I have no idea that the concussions are causing, it could have caused the depression that started, back then. Because in all reality, looking back on it, like I was depressed before my uncle died. Like
Yeah.
it started back then.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I had kind of a lot of ups and downs for my second gap year. And by this time, I'm like 5 years out since a concussion, and I'm still self-medicating. But I'm totally convinced that all my issues are because there's something wrong with my sleep, which
Okay.
there was something wrong with my
Yeah, there
sleep.
was. Pretty suit. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm on this mission to figure
Yeah.
out what is wrong with my sleep. And my psychologist is like, I had gone to get a psych eval to try and talk to him about my sleep.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, you have ADHD. It got worse. And I was like, yeah, I know that. and he's like, you still have anxiety. And I'm like, cool. Um, and he's like, yeah, I think the anxiety is causing, the sleep issues. I've been having nightmares every night since 2015, like
Oh.
still to this day. And so I'm like, okay, so I have nightmares. That's why I'm tired all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and eventually, kind of in this time frame, I'm also like, all right, it's time to go back to school. So I'm sorting everything out with McGill. And so after 2 gap years, I'm going to go back to uni. And 3 weeks before moving up here, I got diagnosed with narcolepsy.
Yeesh. Yikes.
3 weeks. And
Yeah.
yeah, and that was because I knew the person who scheduled the appointments at Vanderbilt. And I was like, hey, I really think something's wrong with my sleep. And they like squeezed me in for a sleep study. So I got to Montreal just kind of unmedicated with narcolepsy. But like at least I knew what was happening,
Yeah.
you know. And so it took me until the end of my second year of university, which was March of 2019, so a year ago,
Yeah.
to find a medication that worked for my narcolepsy.
Oh, wow.
My first 2 years were full of times of trying different medications, like going to different doctors. I was trying different lifestyle
Yeah.
changes that involved no medication because I wasn't responding well to these other ones. Um, and my narcolepsy is still progressing at this point. It kind of progresses for the first few years. And it was progressing to the point to where I was having a sleep attack every couple hours. And it also like would cause, and it still does sometimes, but not as much, is half my face will kind of go paralyzed. And so I got taken to the ER a few times for a stroke.
Yeah.
You don't have a stroke.
No.
uh, and so, at this point, like my, I'm still using and drinking a lot. It's gotten a lot worse because now I'm up in
Yeah.
Canada
Yeah.
and everything's legal. And I thought, if I have narcolepsy, I'm gonna fall asleep all the time and not pay attention. Like I might as well feel good.
Yeah.
And so that was the thought process. But yeah, once I started on the new medication, like I could function again, and my life really changed. But my drinking and using habits didn't. So after several months, like I hit this rock bottom, realized I was an addict and alcoholic, um, and now I have just over 7 months of clean and sober time. Um, and so still the way I see it is that my drinking and using time was me creating this lifestyle that I knew best from the 4 years of this concussion.
Right.
Um, and then when I finally got out of that depression, not having any support, so that's what made me want to recreate it. And so it's kind of like almost 8 years after this concussion, I'm just now dealing with all of these feelings that, I should have been dealing with when I was 15 years old.
Wow.
And, I can see there are reasons that I felt off, and I can see that the concussion really did impact my ability to handle these other life events that occurred. And that it's okay for me to feel grief about my old life,
Yeah.
and to feel grief for, that 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old that didn't get to do high school or be a kid the same way other kids get to be kids. And that's valid. And it's kind of like this alcohol and drug recovery is the last step of my concussion recovery is what it feels like to me. Um, but now, like, I can tell you that, like, I'm a pretty happy person most
You
days.
seem happy, yeah.
Yeah,
You
I'm
know,
content at the least. I'm still not good at experiencing my feelings all the time, but yeah, I'm getting better at it. I'm reading again. I go to my classes. I eat and I sleep well. And I think one of the big things is I don't feel stupider
yeah,
than before. My brain still feels like it's healing, and that could be due to the getting clean and sober.
yeah,
But also, it had never really fully recovered from the concussion, so I think it's just like this combination of mess. Um, and I'm really grateful that I survived that part, like that
yeah,
far. Yeah, and for the most part, I'm able to look back on my past and accept it and accept the feelings that go with it. I do find it's better not to play the whole what if game with my
yeah,
past, but one of the big reasons that I'm in this club and we're trying to push the support group um, is that I think with better awareness surrounding concussions and mental health, we can encourage the validation and acknowledgement of the struggles that others may experience with their concussions, you know,
yeah.
and
Makes sense.
and these struggles that are a complex mix of like direct difficulties from the concussion and also impacts of external life events um, on someone's current state. And I
Yeah,
think we can, increase the spaces that are held for these people, more support groups. I
yeah.
mean, it's
I was
kind of
gonna,
like, sorry.
oh, I was going to ask you, I supported the support group, so your story is just absolutely fascinating. Like, that's a in depth. That's a complex story, though. That's fascinating. But so is that what you speak to the? Do you get up in the support groups and talk to not only students but interested participants of the support groups? Do you talk to them about that, or do you open the floor to let people talk about their prisons, their concussions, or mental health issues?
We open the floor for the most part. Um, and then like we had a really, really good session last week. And it was a small group. We're a bit smaller in the winter time. I don't
Yeah,
think people to come out when it's
yeah,
icy out,
yeah,
which totally makes sense.
yeah,
Um, we it was me and these two guys, and we were talking about a lot about the derealization. And I was like, yeah, it
yeah,
feels like
yeah.
if I remember it feeling like I was watching a movie, and they were like, oh,
The
that's
Kroger, that Kroger story.
it. What?
You don't know that Kroger story? That
Oh,
Kroger?
I can't remember if I did. I'm sure I did.
Okay.
um, but the big thing is me being farther along is I'm able to kind of listen and then give them ways to verbalize it.
Yeah,
And it started out with us talking about the lack of empathy and the apathy that happens and feeling like we're just watching a movie. And by the end of the session, we were all kind of just joking about different stories, and there was a lot of really heartfelt laughs. And
yeah. That's good.
that's really special to see because that
Yeah,
is feeling, that's not apathy. And it allows them to feel more normal considering their circumstances and
right.
to really have their feelings validated and acknowledged, you know? And
Yeah, no, totally.
it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't feel as crazy when there's somebody else. It's like, yeah, I know
That
exactly what
no,
you're talking.
exactly. That knows understands what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah, and
that's a tough thing about brain training. I mean, just talking to people, they'll say, okay, yeah, I get it, but there's not be some normal person just be like, okay, yeah, I get it, but they don't, and it's not their fault. They can't get it because they don't know what
right.
it feels like to they try as hard as they can, but they don't get it because they just can't, and it's good they can't because
Yeah,
that means they didn't have a brain tree.
yeah, exactly. But it's nice to have a space where we can talk about it and feel more normal and I
Sounds
think
like it.
it allows these people who are more early in their recovery to kind of accept where they're at. Because I
Yeah,
think a lot of them do spend a lot of time and I did this for years, like fighting it and just ignoring the feelings and like I have a headache, but that's like I'm gonna push through it because that's
Yeah.
kind of how society is built, anyways. It's like
Yeah.
get up and go.
Yeah.
But really, we need to be making sure that, or like helping these people be more empathetic towards themselves and spreading awareness so that others can be empathetic towards them so they can kind of accept where they're at.
Yeah.
You can't, if you have a headache and you're really dying, like, you
Just
gotta
yeah.
take a step back.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. So, and how many of these meetings happen every like Wednesday or like every? I just made up a day. I shouldn't say that because it'll confuse people. But do you have them like once a week or how often
Yeah,
do you have these support groups?
we have them on Mondays from
Okay.
6 to 7:30, and they're on McGill campus. We also, what was really cool is after this one, these two guys ended up going and grabbing, I think, tea together. So
Yeah.
that's nice to see. Nice if we can foster relationships so that they can lean on each other.
Yeah.
Uh, but we also have a Facebook page that's closed, but anyone can ask to join it. It's called Concussion Support Montreal, and all of our support stuff goes up on there. And then if somebody wants to email us at ConcussionMtl@gmail.com, then we also send support group emails so that people know what's going on so that they can come join.
And I found you on Instagram, where you found me. We found you. We found each other on
Yeah.
Instagram. So, what is the Instagram account?
Our Instagram handle, I believe, is also ConcussionMtl.
Yeah, I think so. That sounds right. Yeah.
I'm gonna double check it. And then our Facebook is concussion. Our general yeah, Instagram is ConcussionMtl. Our general Facebook, the not support group one, but also stuff gets posted on there, is Concussion Montreal.
Okay.
And yes,
And
yeah, and so
you're associated with the Concussion Legacy Foundation,
yep,
Canada.
yep, we're one of those branches, one of the
Okay.
university branches. So we do the whole team up, speak up thing in schools,
And
initiative, I
so do
believe.
you go to those, or do you speak at support groups mostly?
No, I love going and doing the education.
Oh,
Uh,
education is your that's your thing.
yeah, I kind of do it all. So when I started in the group, this is my third year in the group. My first year, I was just an educator, so I went into schools and talked.
Yeah.
And then last year, I was the fundraising director. And then this year, I'm the chapter director. I'm actually a co-director. My director has been on exchange, although I believe she now has to come back because of the whole virus
Yeah.
situation.
Exactly. Totally.
Um, so I really enjoy doing the older students.
Yeah.
Like going into SAGEPs because they tend to ask a bit more intense questions.
Right.
Um, and of course, when I'm in those, I do tell my story to an extent with the younger kids, but just more along the lines of I ignored my concussion and then now I'm still
Yeah.
dealing with
Don't
stuff.
do that.
Don't ignore
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It's a real thing that has real impacts. Um,
So yeah. So actually, with Justin, so what does Emily do at McGill? What's your program?
yeah, so I study psychology and I have a minor in neuroscience, and my job is a research assistant at the Montreal Neurological Institute. So
Oh.
I do
And where
school and I work.
is that on McGill campus as well?
Yes. So
And where exactly were these support groups on McGill? You said they're on McGill campus, but is there on? I've been to Montreal a bunch of times, but I don't know McGill. How was the best way to find that? If you are at McGill, what's the best
yeah,
way for people to find that?
so it is at. I'm pulling the address up now because I always mix up two of the numbers. Classic. Some things are just sticking with me. Um, I believe so. It's in the QPRIG building, QPRIG, um, and the address is 3647 Rue University, and it's on the third floor. Um, and the door is sometimes locked and sometimes not. There's a doorbell, so people can ring it or they can send we make a post every time there's going to be a support group, and people can
Okay.
comment on it. And
So
then
check your Facebook page first or your
yeah, the
Instagram.
concussion support group, and we have a lot of activity on there. Sometimes other people go meet up and
That's good.
chat, and we have our resource list up there, which has a lot of the clinics listed um, and what they offer, as well as other things like the different types of massage um, and visual rehab places. So we have a bunch of resources up on there.
Well, that's perfect. That's great. And so yeah. So I mean, do you have anything else you'd like to add, or do you think you've spoken your piece?
Um, yeah, no, I think we're good. I think, yeah, the big thing that we're focused on is the
Education.
psychological side and making sure people know about it so that way they can deal with it in a proper way and their journey doesn't have to be quite as intense as
And
others.
your education groups will go out to people, but your support groups are at Rue University 3. The
Six,
address 3647
yep,
University in McGill campus on Mondays at 6:30, 8:30. Is that right?
6 to 7:30.
6 to 7:30. 6 to 7:30. So 1800 to 1930.
Yeah, and I believe in the fall we're hopefully gonna launch a mini series on top of the concussion support group that will be 8 weeks just about concussion management. We have a neuropsychologist who's helping us set that up, and each week will be a different topic.
Excellent. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
So hopefully those universities and everything in schools and just life in general returns to normal. I mean, this is only March 13th now, so I mean, obviously, I'd say I don't know, I shouldn't speak now, but your Monday's support group is probably, is that still at 6?
yeah, we're still, well, actually, that's a really good question. I have to see because if the university
Yeah.
shuts down, that building might shut down.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
we before we had our own space, we would often try and meet in a quiet cafe, which I
Uh,
just it's kind of tough for people to be as vulnerable and open in that setting.
the
Um,
Quack Cafe or a Quack Cafe?
a
Like
quiet
it's our.
cafe.
Okay.
There's a few we choose from.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if
Um,
there's a place called the Quack Cafe. If there's
no,
anybody
not
listening is
the
wants to
quiet.
make a coffee place, I bet that would be a good name. But that'd be
So we'll update all that info on the Facebook page.
great. Well, thank you so much for joining and for telling your story. Is just fascinating. So and I think it would be very helpful for people who are dealing with concussion and for other mental health issues and associated mental health issues and yeah, I think it's really great. So thanks, and hopefully people will, when they can, visit your support groups.
Yes, yes, when they can. Thank you so much,
Uh,
Nick.
Thank you. Make sure to visit the McGill chapter of the Concussion Legacy Foundation Canada's website at ConcussionMtl.com, ConcussionMtl.com, and visit their Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages at ConcussionMtl. And please visit ConcussionTalk.com for more podcasts, and visit my Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter pages at Concussion Talk. Thank you, and I hope you listen again soon. Music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.